What if I told you that most people spend their entire lives competing, and that's exactly why they never become truly successful? Think about it. Every day, millions of Americans wake up, commute to work, answer emails, attend meetings, and chase promotions. Businesses fight for the same customers. Employees compete for the same jobs. Creators compete for the same attention. And somehow, despite all this effort, most people feel stuck. Why? Because they're playing a game everyone else is already playing. Now here's the strange part. The biggest breakthroughs in history didn't come from people who competed better. They came from people who stopped competing altogether. Amazon didn't become Amazon by creating another bookstore. Netflix didn't become Netflix by building another blockbuster. Apple didn't become Apple by making a slightly better computer. They created something different, something new, something nobody else had. Yet most of us are taught the opposite. We're told to fit in, follow proven paths, copy what already works, study the competition, benchmark against the market. Do what everyone else is doing, just a little better. But what if that's terrible advice? What if your biggest opportunity isn't hidden inside the crowd, but outside of it? Imagine spending 10 years climbing a ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. Imagine working harder than ever while moving nowhere meaningful. Imagine competing in a race where even the winner doesn't truly win. That's a scary thought, but it's also incredibly freeing. Because if success isn't about competing harder, then maybe you don't need to run faster than everyone else. Maybe you need to see something they don't. Maybe you need to build something they haven't imagined. Maybe you need to think differently. And that's exactly what today's book is going to change. Welcome to Daily Audio Insights. I'm your host, and today we're diving into 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. This book has become one of the most influential business and innovation books of the modern era, selling millions of copies worldwide and becoming required reading for entrepreneurs, startup founders, investors, and ambitious professionals across America. In a world where artificial intelligence is reshaping industries, remote work is changing careers, and competition is becoming global overnight, the ideas inside this book feel more relevant than ever. Peter Thiel isn't just a writer. He's a billionaire entrepreneur who co-founded PayPal and became one of Facebook's earliest investors. But what makes this book special isn't the success story. It's the question he asks. A question that most people never stop to consider. What valuable truth do very few people agree with you on? At first, it sounds like a strange interview question, but the more you think about it, the more powerful it becomes. Because every major breakthrough begins with someone believing something others don't. And that idea leads us directly into the first lesson. The most dangerous trap is winning the wrong game. Imagine you're driving across America. You start in New York and your destination is Los Angeles. You have a full tank of gas, you have snacks, you have a reliable car. Everything seems perfect. But there's one problem. You're heading east. No matter how hard you drive, you'll never reach your destination. Effort isn't the issue. Direction is. This is exactly how many people approach their careers and businesses. They work harder, longer hours, more meetings, more stress, more competition. Yet somehow the results barely improve. Peter Thiel argues that competition is often overrated. That idea sounds almost offensive in modern culture. After all, we're taught that competition makes us stronger. But let's look closer. Imagine two coffee shops across the street from each other. Both sell similar drinks, both offer similar prices, both run similar promotions, both fight for the same customers every day. What happens? Profit margins shrink, stress increases, marketing costs rise.
Both owners spend enormous energy watching each other. Neither owner has much freedom. Now imagine a completely different scenario. A coffee company creates a unique subscription service that delivers personalized coffee experiences nationwide. Suddenly, they're not fighting over foot traffic on one street. They're creating a category of their own. That's a very different game. Many working professionals unknowingly live inside competitive traps. You might spend years trying to become slightly better than coworkers, slightly more productive, slightly more available, slightly more impressive. But eventually, everyone becomes exhausted. Why? Because competition forces people to become similar. The harder competitors fight, the more they resemble each other. Look at airline companies. Many offer nearly identical experiences. Look at streaming services. Many chase the same content strategies. Look at social media platforms. Many copy each other's features. Competition creates convergence. Innovation creates divergence. That's an important distinction. The biggest rewards don't come from being the best copy. They come from being the only original. Think about your own life. How often do you compare yourself to others? How much energy goes into keeping up, keeping pace, matching expectations? What if that energy could be redirected towards creating something uniquely yours? Please think about that for a moment. Let's go deeper, because once you understand why competition can become a trap, a bigger realization begins to emerge. The future doesn't belong to people who follow trends. The future belongs to people who create them. Think about that for a moment. Every major innovation once sounded ridiculous. The smartphone, online banking, electric vehicles, streaming movies, artificial intelligence. At one point, each idea seemed unlikely, even impossible. Yet someone believed in it before the rest of the world did. And that's where our next lesson begins.
The future belongs to people who see what others miss. Have you ever noticed how obvious great ideas seem after they succeed? Once something becomes popular, everyone says they saw it coming. Everyone claims it was inevitable. Everyone acts as if the outcome was obvious. But that's not how reality works. Before success becomes visible, uncertainty hides it. And most people avoid uncertainty. That's why extraordinary opportunities often go unnoticed. Imagine you're sitting in your apartment after a long workday. You scroll through social media, you watch the news, you read articles about the economy, artificial intelligence, layoffs, and market shifts. Everywhere you look, people are reacting to trends, reacting to headlines, reacting to what already happened. But very few people are asking a different question. What happens next? What doesn't exist yet? What problem is growing that nobody seems to notice? Peter Thiel argues that progress doesn't happen by copying the present. It happens by creating the future. That sounds simple, but think about how differently most people operate. Most people look for proof before they believe. Innovators often believe before proof exists. That's why they appear strange. That's why they're often misunderstood. And that's why they frequently discover opportunities that others miss. Let's make this practical. Imagine you're a software engineer in Texas. Artificial intelligence is transforming your industry. Most people around you are doing the same thing, taking the same courses, learning the same tools, following the same online influencers. There's nothing wrong with that. But what if you asked a different question? Instead of asking, what skills are popular today, you ask, what skills will become essential 3 years from now? That single shift changes everything. One question keeps you in the crowd. The other moves you ahead of it. Think about how many industries have changed because someone saw a future others ignored. When people rented DVDs, someone imagined streaming. When people carried paper maps, someone imagined GPS navigation in every pocket.
When most businesses relied on physical offices, someone imagined distributed teams working from anywhere. The pattern repeats throughout history. The future arrives because somebody creates it, not because somebody predicts it. That's an important distinction. Creators shape reality. Observers describe it. Most people spend their lives observing. A small number spend their lives creating. Now here's where things become uncomfortable, because creating the future requires standing alone sometimes. It requires believing in possibilities before validation arrives. It requires patience when others doubt you. And that's difficult. Human beings naturally seek agreement. We want reassurance. We want confirmation. We want evidence that we're moving in the right direction. But groundbreaking ideas rarely come with immediate approval. In fact, the more original an idea is, the less obvious it appears at first. Think back to high school. Maybe there was a student who seemed different. Maybe they had unusual interests, different goals, different ways of thinking. At the time, people may have questioned them. Years later, those same traits might become the reason they succeed. Why? Because originality often looks strange before it looks brilliant. That's true in business. That's true in careers. That's true in relationships. It's true in life. Imagine you're considering launching a side business. Everyone around you recommends following the same model that's already crowded, the same products, the same marketing, the same audience. But deep down, you notice an underserved need, a group of people nobody is paying attention to, a problem nobody is solving properly. Most people ignore that instinct because it feels risky, but that's exactly where opportunity lives. Not in crowded markets, not in obvious answers, not in popular opinions. Opportunity often hides where few people are looking. Here's a quote-style insight inspired by this idea. Average thinking follows the spotlight. Exceptional thinking searches in the shadows. Read that again in your mind. Average thinking follows the spotlight. Exceptional thinking searches in the shadows. Because the spotlight already attracts everyone else. The shadows contain discoveries. This doesn't mean chasing random ideas. It means developing independent thinking. It means questioning assumptions. It means becoming curious enough to investigate what others overlook. Let's bring this into everyday American life. A lot of people spend years chasing promotions because that's what they're supposed to do. Promotion after promotion, title after title. Yet some of the happiest professionals eventually realize they don't actually want the next rung on the ladder. Maybe they want flexibility. Maybe they want ownership. Maybe they want creative freedom. Maybe they want more time with family. The issue isn't ambition. The issue is pursuing someone else's version of success. When you think independently, you gain permission to define success for yourself. And that's incredibly powerful. Because once you stop copying expectations, you start creating possibilities. Peter Thiel challenges readers to ask difficult questions, questions that force independent thought, questions that separate creators from imitators. What important truth do you believe that most people disagree with? What future seems obvious to you but invisible to others? What opportunity keeps pulling your attention? What problem keeps bothering you? What idea won't leave you alone? Sometimes those questions reveal more about your future than any career assessment ever could. The goal isn't to predict tomorrow. The goal is to build it. And that realization leads directly into the most emotional lesson of the entire book, because knowing what to do isn't enough. The real challenge is finding the courage to act. The biggest battle isn't in the market, it's inside your mind. Let's be honest, most dreams don't fail because they're impossible. They fail because fear gets there first. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of uncertainty, fear of looking foolish, fear of making the wrong choice. Sound familiar? Here's something many people never realize. The future is created twice, first in the imagination, then in reality. Every company, every invention, every career change, every meaningful achievement, it all starts as an invisible thought inside someone's mind. And that's where fear does its best work, because fear attacks invisible things. It whispers questions. What if it doesn't work? What if people laugh? What if you fail? What if you're not good enough? What if you're too late? What if someone else is already doing it? Those questions sound reasonable, but over time they become cages. And the most painful part? Most people never notice they're trapped. They mistake fear for logic. They mistake comfort for safety. They mistake routine for progress. Meanwhile, years pass, opportunities disappear, dreams shrink, potential fades. Not because people lack talent, because they lack belief. Imagine two versions of the same person. Let's call him Michael. He's 34 years old. He has a stable job, a decent income, a comfortable routine, but he constantly thinks about starting something of his own. Nothing massive, just a business idea he can't stop thinking about. Version 1 ignores the idea. He tells himself he's not ready. He waits another year, then another, then another. 5 years later, his life looks almost identical. The idea is gone. The excitement is gone. Only regret remains. Version 2 feels the same fear, but acts anyway. Not recklessly, not perfectly, just consistently. He spends weekends learning, evenings building, slowly testing, slowly improving. 5 years later, the results are completely different. Not because he's smarter, not because he's luckier, because he moved while fear stood beside him. That's the difference. Successful people aren't fearless. They're willing to move despite fear. Courage isn't the absence of uncertainty. It's progress in the presence of uncertainty. That's what makes this lesson so powerful, because it applies to far more than business. It applies to relationships. It applies to personal growth. It applies to health. It applies to every meaningful decision in life. Maybe you've wanted to change careers. Maybe you've wanted to start investing. Maybe you've wanted to launch a side project. Maybe you've wanted to move to a new city. Maybe you've wanted to have an important conversation you've been avoiding. Fear always provides reasons to wait. Hope provides reasons to begin. And growth almost always starts when hope becomes louder than fear. The emotional heart of this book isn't really about startups. It's about possibility. It's about recognizing that the future is not something that happens to you. It's something you help create. Every decision shapes it. Every action influences it. Every risk contributes to it.
And every day offers another opportunity to move from imagining a better future toward building one. Does this sound familiar? Maybe you've been waiting for certainty before taking action. Maybe you've been waiting for permission. Maybe you've been waiting until everything feels perfectly aligned. If so, you're not alone. Most people do exactly that. But the people who create extraordinary lives eventually discover something important. Perfect certainty never arrives. The path becomes clear by walking it, not by staring at it. And once you understand that, a remarkable shift happens. You stop asking whether success is guaranteed. You start asking whether the opportunity is worth pursuing. You stop obsessing over outcomes. You focus on meaningful action. You stop waiting for the future. You start building it. And that brings us to the most practical part of this entire summary. How can you apply these ideas in your own life, starting right now? Let's take everything we've discussed and turn it into action. Because knowledge without action is entertainment. Knowledge with action becomes transformation. One of the biggest mistakes people make after reading a powerful book is feeling inspired for a day and then returning to the same habits. The excitement fades, the notes get forgotten, life gets busy, and nothing changes. The purpose of a book like this isn't to impress you, it's to challenge the way you think, and more importantly, the way you act. So let's make this practical. Not someday, not next year, this week. Step 1. Identify one area where you're competing instead of creating. Take 15 minutes and honestly examine your life. Where are you simply trying to keep up? Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's your business. Maybe it's your social media presence. Maybe it's your financial goals. Ask yourself a simple question. What am I doing because everyone else is doing it? Then ask a second question. What's one unique approach I could explore instead? You don't need a revolutionary answer. You just need a different perspective. Sometimes a single new angle creates opportunities that years of competition never could. Step 2. Create a future list. Most people create to-do lists. Very few people create future lists. A future list contains possibilities, ideas, problems worth solving, skills worth learning, industries worth exploring, trends worth understanding. Spend 20 minutes writing down 10 things you believe could become more important over the next several years. Don't worry about being perfect. The goal is to train your mind to think ahead instead of simply reacting to the present. Remember, the future rewards preparation long before it rewards prediction. Step 3. Take one small, courageous action. Not a giant leap, not a life-changing gamble. One small, courageous action. Send the email. Start the course. Make the phone call. Launch the website. Record the first video. Reach out to the potential mentor. Apply for the opportunity. Have the difficult conversation. Whatever you've been postponing because of uncertainty, take one meaningful step forward. Action creates clarity. Waiting rarely does. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is momentum. And momentum changes lives. Now, let's zoom out for a moment, because beneath all the business lessons, startup stories, and innovation strategies, 0 to 1 delivers a message that feels surprisingly personal. The world doesn't need another copy. It needs original thinking. The greatest opportunities rarely appear where everyone is looking, and the future belongs to people willing to build something new instead of endlessly competing over what already exists. Think about your own journey. Maybe you're building a career. Maybe you're growing a business. Maybe you're raising a family. Maybe you're trying to improve your finances. Maybe you're searching for more meaning in your work. Whatever season of life you're in, this book offers an important reminder. Your future is not predetermined. It isn't locked in place. It isn't controlled entirely by circumstances. Every meaningful improvement begins when someone decides to think differently. History is filled with examples. A founder who saw potential where others saw risk, an investor who believed before the crowd, an inventor who ignored skepticism, a creator who kept building while others doubted. At the time, their choices appeared uncertain. Looking back, they appear obvious, but that's only because success hides the uncertainty that came before it. The same principle applies to your life. The decisions that shape your future may not feel obvious today. They may feel uncomfortable. They may feel risky. They may feel uncertain. That doesn't mean they're wrong. Sometimes uncertainty is simply the price of growth. Think about how many opportunities are missed because people assume someone else has already figured everything out. They wait for experts. They wait for permission. They wait for guarantees. Meanwhile, the people who move forward aren't necessarily more talented. They're simply more willing to begin. That's an empowering thought, because it means your future isn't reserved for extraordinary people. It's available to ordinary people willing to think independently and act consistently. The distance between average and exceptional is often smaller than it appears. It begins with a different question, a different belief, a different action, repeated over time. Peter Thiel's message isn't that everyone should start a billion-dollar company. It's that everyone should develop the ability to see opportunities others overlook. That's valuable whether you're an entrepreneur, an employee, a student, a manager, or a parent. Independent thinking creates better decisions create better outcomes, and better outcomes create better lives. Imagine where you could be 1 year from now if you stopped chasing every trend and started developing your own vision. Imagine what could happen if you spent less time comparing yourself to others and more time building something meaningful. Imagine the confidence that comes from knowing you're creating instead of merely reacting. That's the deeper promise hidden inside this book. Not wealth alone, not status alone, freedom. The freedom to think for yourself, the freedom to pursue meaningful goals, the freedom to create value that didn't exist before, and ultimately, the freedom to shape your own future. As we wrap up, let's remember the three biggest takeaways. Competing harder isn't always the answer. Sometimes the greatest success comes from creating a completely different game. The future isn't discovered by following the crowd. It's built by people willing to think independently and act on ideas others ignore. And courage matters more than certainty, because every meaningful achievement begins before success is guaranteed. Those three ideas alone can change the way you approach your career, your business, your finances, your relationships, and your life. Because once you stop asking, how can I keep up, you start asking, how can I create something new? And that question changes everything. If today's summary made you think differently, you're in the right place. At Daily Audio Insights, we break down the world's most powerful books so you get the wisdom without the weight. Hit subscribe, drop a comment telling me which lesson hit hardest, and I'll see you in the next one.